How about we talk about clenching your teeth and creating extension for performance? Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. It is Tuesday. Clinic day today, so very, very busy. Got a lot to do before we roll into the clinic. So let's dig into today's Q&A. And today's Q&A is with Sarah, and I've known Sarah for a little while now. She actually went through the intensive, and so we communicate on a regular basis with ongoing communication in that regard. And finally got a chance to talk to her face to face, which is fun. And we talked a little bit about some issues associated with people that clench their teeth, especially at night, and influence of guards and things like that. But then we went into a situation where you actually need to create what it would be considered traditional spinal extension for performance. So we were talking about gymnastics and a couple of other sports, but there are situations where we actually want to use these compensatory strategies for force performance. And so we talked about how to create some of those situations. So this is a pretty interesting call. I'm sure you will enjoy it. For those of you that would like to participate in a 15-minute consultation, just go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com, put in your request, throw me a question, and we'll get that arranged. We got a few calls to get through yet, so there's a little bit of a backlog, so please be patient. Have a great Tuesday. Here's the call, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right, we are recording. Sarah, what is your question?
Okay, so for a client who has difficulties with clenching at night and during the day, what would you suggest for some solutions, and why would the client be doing this?
Okay, so think about what clenching is. It's internal rotation. It's force production. Okay, so they're trying to create an element of compression and control and increased muscle activity, right, for whatever reason it may be. So if we were looking at any exercise and we saw a compensation for a lack of internal rotation somewhere, you would see like an anterior orientation, you would see excessive, what people would call excessive pronation, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a pronate, if they're clenching equally on both sides, let's just say that they are, okay, that's a bilateral internal rotation strategy. So again, they're looking for a position of control. They're trying to restrict movement. Most likely you're going to see it show up in the upper cervical spine. So the upper cervical spine and the mandible would move together. And so if I clench, I am not allowing that to move.
Okay, so they're trying to find stability in the upper C-spine by clenching.
However you want to define that is okay by me. I would say that they're trying to produce force downward to hold position for whatever reason it may be.
Okay. So do those night guards that the dentists give people to like stop them from clenching, do those help then or not?
They don't stop them from clenching, they just give them space. And so you're moving the mandible down and forward, which is the opposing strategy, right, to whatever degree. So you're going to get a reduction in output potentially. The idea would be is that we have to kind of look at this whole thing systemically and say, okay, number one, why are you, and the why to whatever degree that we can figure this out, because we rarely know why anyway, right? We apply strategies based on probability to produce the outcome. But again, the goal then is to try to give them an alternative to the strategy that they're using that reduces the impact of that strategy to begin with. So it's just like anyone else. If somebody is using a compensatory strategy for internal rotation, so if we were looking at somebody's feet and we said, oh, they have an internal rotation strategy, so they pronate a lot, and if that's creating part of the problem, we would give them some form of orthotic solution to reduce the translation of the tibia over the foot, to slow that down. So that reduces the strategy. So you might do something orally to do the same thing. So if I put an orthotic in your mouth, what do you think that is? It's the same thing as putting the orthotic underneath the foot. It's just a strategy that gives them the alternative, right? Allows them to access a broader scope of options, which in many cases, thankfully, alleviates the symptoms.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. that it?
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't think so. Wow.
Um,
Yeah, it's like, I'd be like the shortest Q&A call of all time. What's your other question?
Okay. So my other question that I was coming up with is, I guess it's kind of in regards to me a little bit. So, how would you go about progressing somebody who wanted to be able to do like a back bend bridge, not necessarily walking out into it, but like a gymnastics bridge where they fully bridge up with their
the
arms up
extension thing?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
How would you progress somebody who is compressed both A to P to be able to do something like that?
Okay, so let's determine first and foremost what would be the optimal representation to get into that position.
Compressed posteriorly would be
compressed posteriorly, but
and expanded anteriorly.
There you go. Now, so here's the question mark that we have to have first and foremost. Do they even have the capacity to assume that shape? That's the first question, right?
I think to some degree, but probably with compensation.
Okay, and that's fair. But the question mark is, so let's just take like all right, here you go. 8-year-old gymnast doing a back bend. 35-year-old female doing a back bend. Okay, huh?
I said yes, 35-year-old female doing a back bend.
Okay, but let's make the comparison here. Which one do you think has the greatest capacity for the soft tissues to yield sufficiently to allow that to occur?
The 8-year-old.
Yeah. So that's actually an element that we have to take into consideration, right? So if I have flexible pars on my spine, guess what? I have greater access to the compressive strategy on the posterior side than someone else. You ever see those little girls that they lay on their belly and they kind of prop up on their hands and then they put their feet on the back of their head? So they don't have hip extension.
Oh,
they don't have hip extension. They are in the negative degrees of hip extension when they're doing that. What they do have the capacity to do is create the compressive strategy, the anterior orientation and the nutation position that allows them to access that position, because that is an IR position.
Oh, right? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. How about that?
I wouldn't have thought of that. I would assume that they would have had
to think about it. They're pushing hard into the ground. So when the spine goes forward, that's what we call traditional extension. So they're using a massive amount of internal rotation to get into that position.
Okay.
Yeah. That's an orientation all day, every day. There's no expansion. There's no expansion on the backside of their body there, which is advantageous from a gymnastics standpoint, because everything that they do is based on that orientation. That's why we see the pars defects and such in all the young gymnasts that we see. Some of them are actually, I mean, that's a byproduct of performance, and they use it to their advantage, right? It gives them the movement capabilities that they need.
In a minute. Oh, I like your shirt. It looks very good. Okay. So the first step would be to get some sort of anterior expansion
all day, every day. Yeah, for sure. So this is where you're actually going to start to train a compensatory strategy for performance purposes. So think about it. It's like for every element of dorsal rostral expansion that I have, I just made it harder for them to assume this position.
Okay.
But you need to create the anterior expansion. So think about what would be a really good representation? It's called, I think it's called like a tabletop or something like that. Like in yoga, where they're sort of like in that crab walk position, but with the hips up.
Yeah.
So you want to see the posterior aspect of the pelvis get compressed and the posterior thorax get compressed. There's your position, because the only place that you can expand is anteriorly.
Okay.
Right. So again, any strategy that's going to promote posterior compression, anterior expansion from a performance standpoint. Remember, we're trying to achieve something that demands a compensatory strategy. This is not normal relative motion,
right?
Okay, and we need to make sure that we take that into consideration, and that anybody that's actually watching this understands that.
Yeah.
That's right. It's like all of this movement that we're talking about is not necessarily related to acquiring health. We are trying to acquire a position for performance purposes.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. So tabletop position and then working.
I'm just using that as a representation. So under normal circumstances, if we were talking about, let's say, a typical physical therapy patient, we might be talking quadruped activities, which would create a concentric orientation posteriorly and allow the pump handle and the pubis to expand forward.
Okay.
Right. So depending on who we're talking about, where we're starting, we just have to understand where we are in space to produce the movement. But for like again, for a back bend, that would be in this extreme position. It's all compensatory.
Okay.
Athletes use compensatory strategies to produce force all the time because the amount of force that they have to produce is extreme. So if we were talking about a baseball pitcher, we'd be having the same conversation. At the point of maximum propulsion of the baseball pitcher, they're using a compensatory strategy to stop movement to allow the velocity to be demonstrated. For a gymnast, we're creating a massive amount of posterior compression to create an anterior expansion, which allows them to assume all the amazing positions that they use, but they're all compensations.
Would you still need more of that overhead top ER position though to get there?
No, because think about it. So they're going to use a posterior compressive strategy. They're going to use anterior expansion and orientation. So they're actually going to tip the thorax backwards. They're going to be in an IR position with the arm overhead because under most circumstances, especially for a gymnast, if their arm is overhead, they're producing force. And I cannot produce force in an ER position. So there's a big difference between acquiring ER relative motion and producing an overhead arm position under force, because it's got to be IR up there. And so you've got to create the IR orientation. That's why we got to talk about creating space for movement and producing force and movement, because people want to get carried away with like, oh, this position is always ER. No, it's not, because it depends on the physical shape of your body in space. That's what determines whether we're talking about ERs and IRs. When we're talking about relative motions, we have nice transitions between expansion, compression, and expansion again. When we're talking about performance, it's IR, because that's where the force is produced. Okay. Velocity is demonstrated in ER. They're not the same.
Okay.
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 Cool.
Yeah.
You've got 2 minutes.
Okay.
Got a quick.
So someone who struggles with compressive strategies posteriorly at both like C6, C7, and at the top part of the sacrum of the pelvis.
Yep.
For management strategies, and they've kind of got tightness all the way down the right side of their back as well. What would you suggest is like top priority when working with someone who's got like it down the whole entire thing?
Okay. So let's think about why this would happen. So you've got dorsal rostral compression, and so that would lead to what would be considered traditional lower cervical extension. There is no turning there. You have to have dorsal rostral expansion and lower cervical flexion to create turns. Same rule applies at the base of the sacrum and the lower part of the lumbar spine. First order of business is I've got to create a yielding action to allow that expansion to occur, right? Because that's going to allow the turns to occur, and that's going to alleviate the concentric orientation that's creating this compressive strategy in the first place. And so under these circumstances, depending on the environment that we're working in and what we're trying to acquire, these are going to be sort of like a lot of the sideline, short amplitude turns and rolls. But I'm going to fix the cranium and the upper cervical spine, and I'm going to try to get everything to turn below it.
Oh, okay.
Because this counter turns to the lower cervical spine. So if I do this,
right?
If I try to drive it top down, good luck, not going to happen. Right? I'm going to fix this, and then I'm going to turn them down here.
So you would want them to keep their head like on a pillow, essentially.
Well, yeah, but don't let the head turn. Don't let the head turn, right? So if the pillow's here, I'm doing this. I'm not doing that.
So you want them to keep their head with the roll then?
I want to, it turns separate. It turns separate. So their eyes would be fixed straight ahead. Their nose is always fixed straight ahead. And then, so if I was laying on my right side, I would roll my left shoulder forward, but my head position would not change.
Okay.
See it?
Yeah.
Because I want the lower cervical spine to turn relative to the upper cervical. So relative motion is what restores the comfort.
Right.
Okay. So that's what we're shooting for. Does that help you?
It does.
Awesome. Great call. Thanks. I appreciate you.
You too. Thank you.